I've been getting a lot of attention and feedback regarding the podcast. Somehow my friends got word of it because I was too embarrassed to share it the first time you did.
Yeah, I named you in I sort of tagged you in it so that you kind of couldn't hide from the fact that you'd made it.
Yeah. So they've been asking me to record, and here we are.
Oh, excellent. I've been getting some kind of feedback as well. People sort of come up to me and say, "Oh, I listened to your podcast." And I was like, "Oh, nice." I guess sort of when you post something or post it on Facebook, people just listen to it, don't they?
Yeah, I don't think they've actually listened to it, but they like the idea of it. So we can't disappoint now. So this has to be high quality this time.
All right. Well, I think we've got some juicy topics today. Some interesting and some controversial stuff.
Yeah, we're well prepared.
We're very well prepared.
Which is actually even relevant to you. Maybe we should give people an overview of what's coming.
Yeah, let's have a little what's on the menu for today's podcast so that we don't lose everyone before it gets really interesting.
Yeah, this edition of Confidently Incorrect with Max and Euan.
That title is going to be extremely apt today as we make many misjudged comments that I'm sure will come back to bite us later.
100%.
100%. So please, we are confidently incorrect, and a lot of the stuff we say we may regret and may not really mean. But yeah, so the two topics we're going to be talking about today that are particularly juicy. So coming up, first of all, we're going to talk about the Warwick University rape group scandal.
That's right.
Where a group chat from my university were in a sort of boys-only group chat. I think it was the History Society, or it might have been a group relating to that. And they basically said a bunch of things that were extremely shocking and just horrible about female students at the university.
Yeah.
Basically, they've been suspended, although apparently.
Well, we can give the overview later.
Sorry,
I think.
Sorry, we'll move on to it. Yeah. That's just what we're going to talk about.
Yeah. The second thing, this is something that you actually brought up and really wanted to talk about, which is based on a BBC radio report, I guess, called "Why We Cut Men," which is sort of exploring the idea of circumcision and its role in society in the West End, in Africa, especially.
We'll put it in the show notes so you can listen to that before or after our discussion of it, if you'd like.
Yeah, but we'll give a summary when we get to it, I guess.
Exactly.
Yeah, those are the two topics, and I think we should also start with maybe some things related to the feedback we got, as well as some stuff relating to the things that we talked about in the previous episodes. So I think that the first item there could be the university strike, which we talked about in some length. Yeah, do you have an overview of what the conclusion was? I've like just two sentences that I pulled out, which is that basically, well, maybe we should summarize what happened. Do you want to quickly summarize?
Sure. So basically, the strikes are now over. They've been suspended, not completely gotten rid of, basically because there's been a kind of agreement between the university staff and the union, not the union, the sort of organisation that runs their pensions, that they will set up a committee to find a fair solution, whatever that is, and they will accept the findings of that committee. I'm not sure if they will or not, actually, but the committee will run its course, and afterwards they'll decide whether they want to go back on strike or not, but they're not going to strike in the meantime. This very much feels to me like kicking it into the long grass, because I don't think the committee's going to come up with the result that both sides will be happy with. It can't.
Yeah, this is exactly the thought that I had, which is that this doesn't seem like a solution. It just seems like you're saying, okay, we're both going to have a joint committee of experts which is going to look at this. But in the end, I mean, obviously I don't know the exact details. This seems like the sort of thing that would hurt the strikers more than the universities, because by the time this expert committee, I don't know who's on it, but this expert committee comes with something that maybe one of the parties doesn't like, the level of enthusiasm for the strike on the student side, I think, is going to be decreased a lot. I think they'll have a lot less empathy and support from the outside, maybe. I don't know about this, to be honest, for the striker side.
Yeah, I don't see it really going that well for them, because they've got like everything can go wrong for them. The thing is, like, the university can just keep it going. Like the organisation can keep this going I don't know what's going to happen in the meantime. I guess the status quo for the meantime, they're not going to make any changes while this is going on. But once the committee comes up again and gives them the answer they're not going to want to hear, like, what's going to happen then? Like, I just think there's going to be more strikes, to be honest with you. But,
Yeah, although I think the main point might have been just to get it out of exam term, which was obviously the big worry that the university have, and a lot of the leverage that the lectures had, which is to say that, if this goes on to exam term, the disruption to students is going to be so large that it will invalidate or call into the question, the exams themselves. And relating to that, I actually saw, I don't remember if it was Snapchat or Messenger, but I'm getting ads served to me about groups that are trying to sue or do something to get compensation for their missed lectures from their student fees.
Really?
Yes. And obviously, if the strikes had continued into exam term, that would have been such a bigger issue even. Yeah. But anyway, I think that's a good place to just quickly wrap that up. But I thought we should mention it considering there had been developments.
Yeah, absolutely. Was there anything else we wanted to follow up on?
I don't recall, but maybe we should do a bit of just a tiny bit of housekeeping, because remember we had gotten some feedback from our friends who actually had listened to the podcast.
Yes, the ones who have listened rather than the ones who like it in the abstract.
Exactly, those friends. Who commented a bunch of things which I think we should warn our audience that we're going to implement, I think, which is to say that shorter podcasts, that was a suggestion. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it was an interesting suggestion from one of our mutual friends. I think we might do that. We're going to still record, I think, for the same amount of time, but I might chop things up into 2 parts, for example.
Yeah.
I'll sort of end up for example, this episode, I'll see how long it is, and if I think, that's a bit long, I might make it into half an hour episodes instead, just so they're a bit more manageable for people. And if that is the case, then the second thing we'll talk about will be in the second episode. Yeah. But I'll just have to see how long it ends up being.
Cool.
Once I've cut it down.
And then the other thing was to do with, we got good feedback about some of the stuff we talked about relating to universities, and saying that maybe we should focus on that a bit more, because that is the perspective that we have unique to, us compared to many other podcasters. I think what we're going to do right now is concerning the Warwick thing to some extent.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it will always be more interesting to hear our perspectives on things that we're actually involved in directly with, or things like that related to university life. So that's why we've chosen this topic. The second topic, I think, is also still relevant to us because we're people. But yeah, I think that in general we're going to try and keep it, sort of focused on university stuff, so that it's more sort of unique, I guess. Okay, let's get into it then. I think that. Yeah, let's get into the meat and bones of this podcast. The meat and gravy, rather, I think is the saying. So you were already jumping the gun a bit earlier, but maybe now you can go into a bit more detail about the Warwick story. So basically, what's been happening at Warwick is we've had this kind of has been hitting over the last. I think it's been sort of unfolding over the last 2 weeks, but it really sort of made a splash earlier this week when basically it came out that 11 students at Warwick in my year, second year, I think they're all in second year, have been suspended from the university because of these rape jokes. So basically what's happened is the university newspaper, The Boar, released screenshots from a group with people talking about raping girls or women, and they also talked about just racist stuff as a bit as well. It's just very unpleasant. I think you've read. Did you see the tab and the BBC article I sent you? No, actually, this is, I think, just goes to show how big of a story this is. But I learned about it independently. Ah, really? From what you sent me. I was actually going to message you about this story before you messaged me. And I read it in the Boar, I think. Is that your student newspaper? That's our newspaper, yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So I'd heard about it there. Somebody had found it. This is apparently, going viral, I guess. Like beyond Warwick. Yeah. I mean, it's in the BBC. It's in the tab. And it's on Sky News. And yeah, I read through all the screenshots, and it is, obviously we're not going to spoil our listeners' ears now, but, it goes from misogyny to, like, horrible sexist stuff,
racism. There's something about Hitler and Jews in there, comparing them to Corbyn, for example.
The usual grim stuff you wouldn't expect to see highly educated people talking about or saying, hopefully. It's the kind of thing you would see from sort of far right-wing groups. It's pretty disgusting to see it in a context which I never thought I would see it, because I always thought that, you're at university, you're educated, you're supposed to be educated anyway, you should be better than that, and I guess I was just wrong completely about that. So I don't want to say too much about this, but I did actually know one of the people involved in this, because the tab named and shamed 4 of the people involved.
Yeah, I was shocked when I saw that, actually.
Yeah, so this is the main thing I want to talk about, because I had a little bit of a scrap with some people when I was talking about this.
Okay, I'm interested to see which side of this you're going to take, because I think maybe we should say that obviously, talking about actually what happened is not that interesting, of what they said. Obviously, it's awful, but I think, like what you said, the interesting thing is how we react to it. What are the consequences for these people from the university side, from how other people in the uni react to what they did. I think that's really one of the most interesting parts of it.
Yeah, and for me, so like when I went into this when I was talking with my friends about it, my initial opinion was very strongly on one side, and now I just don't know.
Okay, do you want to say what it was?
I thought it was really like quite horrible. I think like that kind of thing's going to scar you for life. And yeah, they were horrible. They're horrible people. They're horrible people for saying these things. But are they horrible people for saying them? Yeah, I think they are. I think they're pretty bad. Let's put it that way.
Would they have harmed anyone if the chat hadn't gone out?
We don't know that.
Because I think, for example, when I read the tab, it was something, but it was talking about how they're supporting the victims and things like that. I don't know if there are victims per se. Do you think there are victims to this?
There are, because they were talking about specific people, so there definitely are victims to it. They were talking, for example, about one girl who had basically claimed she had been sexually abused, and one of the people said she just isn't attractive for that to have happened to her, and that is clearly an attack. That's clearly.
I mean, is it an attack on her?
Yes, absolutely.
She was never meant to hear it. Do you think so?
Absolutely, it's not okay. It's not okay. And the kind of the point I wanted to make was that what my original opinion was that even if it's okay, like let's say it's really bad, like I still didn't think that they should have been named and shamed, because I felt that it was just too life ending. Okay,
I think we should take it step by step. Do you think, first of all, that blowing up the chat in the first place was like a good thing to do?
What, like, putting it on the newspaper and stuff?
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting that on the BBC article, there's an interview with one of the guys at the board, and he said, like, yeah, we thought about it and we just sort of decided that we should in the end. And I think their conclusion was that they should, because people won't realise how bad it is otherwise.
That's a good point. That's a very good point.
In terms of, I think they have to see it, because if you don't, you're just gonna be like, oh, what did they say? It can't have been that bad. And then if people actually see it, like this is in text, in writing, what these people have said.
Yeah, and I think it is a very good idea to generally try to expose, these kind of attitudes, because I think a lot of people who don't have them almost don't acknowledge that they exist, which is a problem in terms of tackling it.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like, if people, I think one of my friends said something that was very poignant to me, which was, even if these guys didn't like rape anyone, or they didn't do anything, they just said this. They contribute to rape culture. They contribute to this idea that it's okay to say things like this, and if it's okay to say things like this, then it's okay to do things like that. And basically, by having people who say these things, you create an environment where crime or sexual crime or any kind of sexual abuse becomes kind of acceptable, actually. And by having people like this existing, even if they do nothing else but say these things, it creates an environment. It convinces other men that they can say things like this and do worse. They can do things that are worse than that.
Yeah, and especially because like posting these chats like that, it takes away all the context of who these people are. And maybe this guy is funny and likes making dark jokes, blah blah blah. And I think that's actually a good thing, because it also in some way emphasizes that even though a lot of people might not be making, obviously not to this extent because what they said was really bad, but might not be saying things for like really bad intent, the effect is still bad. And if you take away the context, which some people might not hear when they overhear and hear this kind of rhetoric, the effect is even worse. And I think that is emphasized by the way that the original chats were posted.
Yeah, I think that is a good point. I think you're saying it was good that they took the context away. You're happy with that. You're saying it because it made the point that it doesn't matter that it might have been in context. It was just still horrible, I think. Yeah, and I would agree with that. I think, like I say, I make a lot of, people will know, I make a lot of sort of dark jokes and things like that all the time. But there's a time and a place for it, and also there's a limit to it as well. I think you've got to be aware of these things when you make these jokes. And and I would never I don't know, this sounds weird, but someone pointed out to me, you would never write any of that down though, would you? And I was thinking, well, no, I wouldn't actually. And that was quite a weird thing to think. These are kind of things I say, sort of amongst a group of people where they're going to understand what I'm saying, rather than writing it down in a group chat where it can be misinterpreted and also it can be sort of drawn upon. I think that, it feels kind of weird to say, but it doesn't really work in a written context. It seems so much worse in a written context almost. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I do agree with you on that actually. Although I don't know how big this group chat was. I think that
it was like 12 people, I think.
Yeah, I don't know if that makes it any worse. But I think that's good. We've established definitely that what they did was wrong, which I think is important to do, to explain.
So I wanted to then sort of move on to sort of take this further in terms of like how typical this behaviour is. Like, have you seen anything like this at your university? Like, how do you sort of have any kind of temperature gauge? Because for me, this took me completely off guard. Like, as I said, I sort of knew one of the people involved in this, and I would have never thought that this was something he would have done. Like, and I think a lot of people would have had the same reaction of kind of shock. Like, it was almost kind of like, he's the murderer kind of thing. Like this kind of strange kind of bemusement about, really, that person? Like, I think a lot of people sort of saw these people as very friendly on the outside.
No, but interesting. I think, I think these people might actually still be friendly.
Right.
I don't know. I think I have a very big sort of level of forgiveness in terms of, I don't think people are horrible people just because of a few things. Especially when, it's quite interesting you would say that, because if they were like really nice on the outside and didn't sort of bring this into their, real life outside of this group chat and this clique, it on the other hand, to what you said about how it sort of encourages, a general sort of kind of rape culture, the effect might not be that direct if those people themselves are actually really upstanding, potentially. Yeah. But answering your question though about have I ever experienced this? I don't think so. No, I'm pretty sure I've never experienced this, but obviously it didn't hit home as hard as it did for you, because this is elsewhere for me.
Yeah, I think what I realised was, like, from our perspective, and we do have to make it clear, from our perspective as sort of white men, we're never going to really feel this the same way as like the people who are directly affected by it. And I think that this was actually, it was more important for sort of the men to see it in a way than for the women to see it, because the women experience it regularly, like this kind of behavior in person, all the time. So I think it's quite good that it's come out so that men can realize this is how other men act, and you shouldn't act like this, and it's not okay. So I think it was really important. I think it was more important that men saw it than women saw it.
100% agree. It's weird that this is more effective, because in a way, this group chat is not like, it's not real. It's in a chat. It's something that people have said. It's not actual, sexual assault, which does occur regularly. It's interesting that this would hit so hard as well.
I think that's why I came back to what I said earlier, is this contribution towards this rape culture, which things like this are not as damaging, but they contribute to an environment which enables rape to happen. And that's kind of an unpopular opinion in many ways, but I genuinely believe that if you have people that act in a certain way, they will they enable others or themselves to create, sort of go ahead and abuse people. I think that genuinely is I don't know what your thoughts are on that sort of rape culture idea.
Yeah, I remember we discussed this a bit with our friends, and it wasn't a popular opinion that you voiced. I think it was also because, and I don't know if they're listening, but they hadn't thought of it that much, maybe.
Yeah.
But I agree that there's a lot of tension created by this, like in a sort of larger societal context, in terms of, I think this is one of the big reasons why, to sort of broaden this out to something more general, like, when you have like the alt-right and all these Gamergate people on the internet being a reaction to what they perceive to be like a type of feminism that like excludes them and things like that. And I think that connects to this in a way because, like we said earlier, these people haven't necessarily done anything. They've only spoken, in a bad way. But you still need to look at it in the way that it has bad effects, and that it is still a bad thing. But anyway, I don't know if I'm qualified to talk about this more deeply, but it's something interesting that we wanted to talk about at the beginning, but then sort of jumped over, was the naming and shaming aspect of it.
Yes, sorry, yeah, we need to come back to that. I was interested. I sort of said what I sort of said what I was thinking about that. I think my current opinion is I don't know. I'm interested to hear what you think.
How come you changed your mind, first of all? So your first opinion was that they shouldn't have been.
Yes.
Which I would say probably maybe I agree with at this point. And you said that you didn't think so because it was such a large, bad thing to happen to them that they might never be able to live down, for example.
Yeah, so basically I talked to two of my friends about this the other day, and after that, basically one of them, a close friend of mine, who's a woman, she basically made a very strong case as to why they should be named and shamed, and but the basic crux of her argument was, if you do this, you enable women to know, look, don't go near these people, basically. That was kind of her argument. And she was like, I want to know how these people are. I want to know that they're out there, and I want to know who they are so that I can avoid them and not have anything to do with them. And I can only respect that opinion because it's not something that I personally am at threat of. But I can totally respect that opinion. That's why I'm now sort of on the fence, because I genuinely don't know. Because I have that very strong case, and I also have this... my sort of natural opinion, which is this just seems wrong. Yeah,
I mean, the thing is, I wouldn't go so far as to say, these people are dangerous. I don't know that. I think that what they said might be, an indication, but I don't know if it's a very strong indication.
Yeah.
So I'm not very sympathetic to that argument, actually.
Okay, all right.
I don't know if you have a right to know.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea, isn't it? Right to know whether someone has said something like that. I don't know. That's the thing. I really don't know whether they do.
There's a bit of like a sort of dystopian Black Mirror type future where everybody's like score about like how kind they've been on the internet, and then you just stay away from the people with the low score or whatever.
Yeah,
I'm not a fan, and I think the harm caused to these people when they have done something wrong, but not illegal, not really 100% directly injuring another party, and then to have them, I don't know what the consequences will be from the university side, but like socially, these people must be completely dead.
Yes, yeah, that's definitely true. Definitely the ones who've been named. That's for sure.
And also, how are these people been chosen out of the 12, 11 students?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure.
Is it just because they're the easiest to figure out? I don't know.
I think that they had been named personally by people who had raised the complaints. Then the tab said, we haven't named the others for legal reasons. So that was interesting. I don't know what's going on there. Apparently 3 of them have already returned to university with suspensions lifted. Mm-hmm. So there sort of goes your point of, well, this isn't awful.
I mean, it is.
So this. Yeah. It is awful, but like I know you sort of. I sort of change what you were saying, but like you were sort of saying like, yeah, well, this shouldn't devastate their lives, kind of thing. And I sort of agreed with that as well. That's why I was kind of against the naming and shaming originally, because I was like, if you name and shame them, it's going to hang over them for the rest of their lives, and I felt like that wasn't appropriate. But maybe I'm wrong, because it is pretty bad what they did.
Do you think it is appropriate generally to teach other people lessons, like in any way. Do you know what I mean?
I don't know what you mean. What do you mean?
It's like, I don't know, do I have a right to, or does anybody have a right to, tell these people how to live, what to think?
I think they were inciting hatred. So I think that qualifies kind of under. It's just not okay. Like, I genuinely think that's what I think that's the sort of crime of it, if it were. I just, and also, like, I think it's okay. I think, yeah, it is okay if people in a society to say you can't say certain things because it's just too hurtful.
But like teaching somebody a lesson in this way, it requires some level of like punishment. You're punishing them.
Yeah.
Which is definitely what like publishing their names is doing. It is a punishment. It is somebody who's sort of like having a sort of moral arbiter role, who's saying that, I have a right to publish these people's names because they are bad. I think these people would have been embarrassed enough just by virtue of their chats being posted.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, I guess, and some people would have known who they were, wouldn't they? So, like, it kind of wouldn't have, it would have gotten out either way. And yeah, socially, yeah, I think that, I don't think the ones who've been named and shamed will be coming back, but I don't know. But I assume that's sort of the general idea, was that they're done, kind of thing.
Yeah. Especially because if you consider how often these kind of things go wrong. I don't know. I've heard about this a long time ago in a different podcast, but it was there's a book called "So You've Been Publicly Shamed."
Oh yeah.
Which sort of has a bunch of examples of people who have said questionable things on Twitter, and have, for some reason mobs have gone after them and ruined their lives. I think one of the examples was a person who was actually going to Africa. I'm sorry, I don't want to make Africa one big country, but she was going to Africa for some humanitarian reason, and who made a joke about AIDS when she got on the plane. And when she got off, she was fired and her life was ruined because people on Twitter had latched onto her bad tweet. And made a shitstorm around her.
And that's what the other reason why I was originally against the naming and shaming, because I was like, this is just going to send people with pitchforks online after them.
And I think it's also going to galvanize the people who sort of are in this like weird position where they're like, these guys are bad, but it's kind of okay. And now they think like, we need to react against this like anti-free speech nanny. You must think what we think, and like counterculture, which you're encouraging, I think.
Yeah, I think it makes the whole thing quite an ugly mess. I noticed that at least I've searched up one or two of the profiles. They're deleted now on Facebook. They don't have any kind of social media presence anymore. The people who were named, which obviously means that they were getting harassed to the point where they just didn't want to have a social media presence anymore. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
There's one more thing I wanted to go on to talk about on this topic. Which was, I think we've both been kind of shocked by this whole thing. I was thinking, like, is there anything that can be done about it? Is it just sort of over time we sort of gradually get better at these things? Do we gradually become more tolerant? We gradually become less prejudice in every sort of way? And that's sort of the trend we've been seeing generally throughout the 20th century and into the 21st century. And I sort of thought that each generation in the West has sort of been more accepting than the last.
Yeah, but there's been reasons for that. There's reasons for that.
Yeah.
See.
Yeah, sure.
Like this is because I've always sort of thought of it in the way like, just by virtue of like diffusion, you're gonna get, a better outcome in the end. So for example, women in like executive positions. Okay, it's just gonna happen. Like we've removed all the barriers. People have role models, all these things, and now we just need to wait for the diffusion of people to the top to happen. But I've been changing my mind on this topic a bit. Mm-hmm. I think that it definitely usually requires some sort of outside drivers to change the status quo. And I think something similar to applies. People don't change their behaviors easily. Like culture is a product of, the people who are, exercising it. I think I don't know what is required. What do you think?
Like, is there anything we can do? Like, I would probably say no. Like, it's just like you can do this kind of thing. You can name and shame them. Does that change the behavior of the people involved? Maybe. Does it change the people around them? I guess. Like, how effective is it?
I think it's one of those things where you definitely need to continuously speak out against it when there are cases. You need to say it's not okay. I don't agree with this, because people, it's the sort of thing what you said about how it enables rape cultures, because it creates a sort of normalcy, right, around like misogynistic things, be them words or actions. And it is by virtue of people speaking out against those things that other people realize that it's not on, because sometimes the only reason they do it is to sort of fit in.
Yeah, no, totally agree. I think, it's not necessary.
But I think, okay, one of the ways of showing how, there's a sort of definite lack of progress of being made is one of the things that I thought about when I first read this is, do you remember of course you do you remember the grab 'em by the pussy comment by Donald Trump?
Yes.
And it was like this is locker room talk kind of excuses being made by Trump supporters. Yeah. And I thought it was interesting because you could definitely sort of see how people might excuse this kind of thing with a similar type of argument.
Yeah, that's funny actually. That's a really good point. Like that was a valid excuse at the time, kind of like, oh, it was locker room. No, I mean not to us, but like,
yeah, and the thing is like, yeah, but there were so many people that agreed with that, women included, that
man, boys will be boys kind of argument.
Yeah. Exactly.
I feel like as long as people, as I say, people keep drawing attention to it and sort of pointing it out and saying it's wrong, that eventually will go away. But yeah, you have to really try and kill it off quite aggressively.
Okay, I think we've covered that quite extensively. Yeah. Also, message us. What do you think? Is Euan an idiot?
Yes, we want to know. Am I wrong? Probably am. Please let me know. I'm definitely going to be stirring up some opinions on this next topic though, Max. Just you wait. So,
circumcision.
Circumcision. Fucking hell, why am I doing this to myself? I know this is a controversial topic, but I want to talk about it anyway. I actually do feel quite strongly about this.
So I've got it fresh in my mind. The thing that you sent me, which is what I listened to, was the radio report called Why We Cut Men. It talks about male circumcision. It starts saying that actually 1/3 of men in the world are circumcised, which I didn't realize. That's quite ludicrous in my opinion. And it was explaining how in Uganda there's a big push to try to get people circumcised because of the way it decreases the male HIV transmission rate to some extent. But then it moves on to say that in the Western world there is no clear medical reason for it, and I think they brought on a lot of people who made arguments against it, saying that it should be called male genital mutilation. Men and boys were victims in this case. I think those were the main points that I took away from it.
I think the sort of just to sort of emphasize that the two big differences were we've had this sort of this African country doing it for doing this big sort of political campaign in a way, this big campaign.
Yes, billions of dollars being invested, worldwide to try to get people circumcised for this reason.
A crazy amount of money going into this for health reasons. The report points out that the health benefits are quite small and probably not worth the money.
And misstated.
Yeah, misstated, but also could actually end up doing more damage because people don't wear protection thinking they are protected once they're circumcised. So doing more harm than good, quite possibly. The second area was kind of this America where we've got this sort of status quo circumcision, which I found really, really shocking, where you've got this kind of, oh, well, we just do it because my dad's had it and his dad had it and we sort of just did it.
Yeah, and it was seen as like even the way they explained it in Uganda, they had interviews with people and said, oh, no, it's modern, it's like better in terms of sexual pleasure for everyone involved. It's cleaner, all these things about it, and that are sort of similar to how in the US, I think people think about it. It's like people look at you weird if you're not circumcised.
Yeah, and there was a point in the American section where this lady says to her boyfriend, "Oh, do you miss your foreskin?" Like in this sort of comedic kind of playful but kind of like mocking way, and that really made me quite angry. Actually, I was like, this kind of attitude that sort of America seems to have towards it. I found quite uncomfortable. This kind of just like, and there was one guy who said there was sort of against circumcision in America who was saying the sort of victims have become the abusers kind of thing, and I couldn't have agreed more strongly with that, because he was sort of saying like, oh well, people just brush it off because now everyone has it kind of thing, and it has just become so entrenched there.
Yeah, and it was interesting to me that they only at the beginning did they mention the fact that it was a Muslim and Jewish tradition.
Yes.
After that, it was not really talked about.
They didn't want to touch that bit. No,
they didn't touch it with a 6-foot pole, and for the US, it was actually quite pertinent because everybody there to a large extent is circumcised regardless of their religion.
Yeah, it's very different to Europe. That's kind of what struck me as well. You sort of think Western countries kind of similar. It's like in Europe, this just isn't a thing unless you're from a religious background in which it occurs. It's just not something that happens in the UK.
And there has been controversy regarding this as well, regarding the tensions between, which actually what I thought this was going to be about, which was the tensions between religious freedom and arguments against, the mutilation of boys' genitals.
Yes, and that's certainly something we'll talk about, because, I'm really not sure. I'm definitely very strongly against the sort of context in America, and definitely against the context in the African example as well. because it was just ineffective. It just wasn't doing anything.
It does, decrease your odds of getting infected. This is a fact.
Yeah, I just for me it just didn't seem like it was getting value for money though. Like the level, like sort of expense, that the sort of scale that it was sort of the money was going into it felt like it was not worth it. At least from the perspective of the report, which clearly had a sort of anti-circumcision kind of agenda.
Oh, most definitely. We should highlight that.
But that's because it's British, and that's just. In Britain, we're just against circumcision generally, except in the religious context, which is the sort of most controversial part, because why is it? Because for me, in a way, like the religious side is worse, right? Because it's people say sort of. I don't want to use the politically charged term mutilating, so I won't. But sort of cutting their child for religious reasons. That doesn't seem right to me. It's, yes, the parents get to decide a lot of things that happen to a baby, but to sort of take away part of their body without the child say so seems kind of wrong to me. I would have thought that would be better to wait until the child was of an age where they could decide for themselves what they wanted it to happen. And then religious groups could sort of move this thing back to later in life when they can make that decision for themselves. But I don't know if that's possible or not.
Yeah, I found this idea of consent regarding circumcision a bit weird. I mean, do children generally consent to anything from a medical perspective ever? Like, is this standard applied to any other medical procedure?
That's true. Like, you can't, there's a lot of things that have happened to children when they're young that the parents decide. So yeah, you can definitely make that argument against sort of what I'm saying.
Like dental treatment, like those are big decisions, right? They affect you in a large way, and there's nobody saying that children should need to consent to those things. Or is there? I don't know. I'm not sure.
No, there is. No, not really.
I don't think I was ever asked about anything. to me.
No, I don't think so. I think it was just sort of like, you'll appreciate this, and I sort of went along. I don't remember being against why anything was happening to me, but I wasn't at an age where I could make that sort of informed choice.
Yeah, braces is a big example, I guess.
Yeah, I think braces is a big example. But the thing is, I guess the point I would make about all of that stuff is it's so temporary. Like the thing about circumcision is it's permanent. So I think it's a bit different, but then I guess there's probably examples of other things as well. But
yeah,
I just feel like, for me, this feels really visceral and quite permanent, and it just seems like it seems, I think, unnecessary as well is the main thing for me. It just isn't necessary. The World Health Organization recommends it, but only in the context of HIV. There's no reason for it to be happening to Americans on a daily basis, other than the sort of documentary kind of makes this sort of tongue-in-cheek remark about doctors earning money from it. But it didn't seem. Apart from that, in my opinion, it's completely unnecessary.
Do you agree with this head of it was some group that was against circumcision who had this saying that she compared circumcision to cutting off a kid's finger? Do you think that is a apt comparison? I thought that was a bit ludicrous. I think this is like the reason why it's happening is because it's a bit more nuanced than that.
Yeah, I think that was an unfair comparison.
Yeah.
There's nothing you can really compare it to, because you could say, oh, it's like cutting off the fingernail. No, because the fingernail grows back, doesn't it? You can't compare it to cutting off a finger, because a finger is used in a lot of ways, and it's much more like, it's just not a comparison that you can
And also,
really
it doesn't have like this, really, really long-standing culture behind it. I don't think we should discount the fact that there is some level of normalcy to it. It's kind of like this weird meta thing where obviously, it is the status quo, and you're saying the status quo isn't right. Well, there's some aspect of its rightness being determined by the fact that it is just, am I making sense?
No. I think that was kind of the sort of what the documentary was touching on as well. Like in America, I mean, I viewed this in a negative way, but you can view it in a sort of neutral way as well, which is, this is just what people do. This is normal. This is part of our culture, and it has been part of American culture for a long time, since sort of like the 50s, I think, or maybe even earlier than that. And so, like, yeah, it's just normal, and I think getting rid of it would be abnormal for those people.
Yeah, but then we wouldn't be saying this if it were about, like mutilating women's breasts, We don't accept it. We don't accept it in other cultures.
What do you think about the comparison that was made with female genital mutilation? You said it in your introduction, this sort of male genital mutilation.
Yeah, it is hard. The reason why it's so shocking and why it's so hard to consider is because we are, living in the culture that we live in, and it's very difficult to view objectively apart from your own experience. And in my own experience, I'm not circumcised myself, but I've never heard anybody, complain about it. So it's very difficult to view it in the same light that we view female genital mutilation, which isn't present in our culture, but which we look down upon in others. You would really need somebody from some third party to look at it from the outside somehow.
Yeah. That is a really good point you raised about no one complains about it. And that's true, no one does complain about it, really. People are just like, what people, I guess the sort of main thing people would say to me is like, it's not a problem, so why are you talking about it? I think, yeah, that fair enough, but at the same time, like, it's still, for me, it's still sort of morally wrong. So that's the kind of reason I wanted to bring it up. But yeah, it's not comparable to things that actually hurt people like female genital mutilation does. But at the same time, it's still something that's done, that's kind of permanent, that the child doesn't get a say in. So that's kind of my final view on it, really.
What did you think of the thing they said at the end, where they said that, in American culture, men can't be victims, and hence why we look at it so differently from the sort of male side to a female side? It was a very brief thing that one of the people being interviewed mentioned, but it was one of those things that, sounded so powerful and wide-reaching, but then was never expanded upon.
Yeah, it's a shame, really.
Do you think it is the fact that it is happening to boys is like a big part of it?
Yeah. Hang on. I don't know. I think that there's definitely in society generally there's this idea that men can't be victims, kind of thing. That definitely exists. Whether that's being applied in this context, I don't know. I think the problem is, with women, the equivalent of circumcision for women is completely different, and it's not the same. That's why it's hard to compare it.
Yes, yeah, this is very true. This is very true.
Because it's not the same thing. It's not when people refer to female genital mutilation as female circumcision, those are the people who are doing it, and they're committing a very heinous crime when they do that. So it's not the same thing at all. And I'm not suggesting for a second that circumcision is criminal.
Do you think it should be, though?
Well, it would never happen, but I would like to see it made illegal in the UK. But I don't think that would ever happen, because votes of people from religious groups would not stand up for it. But I personally do think it's wrong. But that's just my opinion, and I appreciate that everyone has a right to their own opinion, and parents have the right to make the choice for their children that they feel is appropriate. But personally, I don't think that they should be allowed to cut a bit of their child's penis off. But that's just my opinion. It just seems wrong to me. But there you go. Sorry for anyone I've offended.
Well, you should be a bit more confidently incorrect there.
I'm confident. I should be more confident. I just know that there's people that are just going to hate me saying that so much. But it's just how I feel. They can attack me. They can hit back at me. But I'll take the heat. I'll take the heat. I might have to delete my social profile for a few weeks to sort of go undercover. But I should be able to manage it, Max.
Fuck Zuck and all that.
Oh my god.
You know, this is probably the best podcast we've done. Can I just say that? 100%. Big plays. Good stuff.
Yeah, we just gotta keep going through. I'm interested. Would you like to give a final sort of? Would you like to give an opinion on this? Sort of come out of the closet, so to speak.
I don't think anything should be done. Just leave it the way it is.
Leave it the way it is. It's not doing anyone too much trouble, is it? We have bigger issues, and that's another good point. There are bigger fish to fry.
Which I don't think is an argument, by the way. You can tackle more than one issue at a time.
I think in terms of actually, say, example, forcing a law through Parliament that would ban this, that there would be bigger fish to fry in that context because Parliament's time is valuable. But
I mean, a lot of crap happens in Parliament.
A lot of crap does happen in Parliament. In an ideal world, would this be at the top of my agenda of things to change about the world? No, but I still stand by it. But do you think it's morally wrong for parents to sort of cut their child?
No.
Why is it okay?
Well, first of all, the intentions of everybody involved are positive. The harm done is very little. You have to consider abuse they might get if they weren't circumcised in the context of America, where it is like a cultural anomaly, where it's not the case. And
in religious communities as well, because in the context of Judaism, please correct me if I'm wrong, people, but I believe that if you're not being circumcised is part of like a connection with one of the religious figures in the text in the holy text, and if you are not circumcised, that's like pretty bad. Like you're not properly a Jew if you're not circumcised. So yeah. I can appreciate that would be quite ostracizing for you if you weren't circumcised within a community. And that's a very good point that you raised there about that sort of abuse that you could get.
And also, again, I'm a bit skeptical about the harm done, because if nobody that's actually had it done really seems to have a problem with it. Yeah, I think one of the case where, like, let's say somebody comes back and says, "Oh, I wish I hadn't been circumcised." WTF, mum? Then it's a bit more difficult, and I don't really know what to tell to that person. So
yeah,
I'm going to be inconfidently incorrect. Unconfidently.
I don't know.
Judgment. Not confident. Still incorrect.
Yeah, I don't know what the opposite of confident is. But I'm confident that I feel very confident in my sort of opinion about this, and I'm sure I can definitely appreciate sort of where you're coming from.
Thing is, if we have opposing opinion, one of us must be right.
Yeah, exactly. We've got all bases covered there, right? Unless there's some super nuanced opinion on that you're supposed to have on this, which we just couldn't possibly have. But I think I definitely see the flaws in my own argument, which is this just doesn't work, like what I'm saying. I think I'm more arguing from just a moral sort of this sort of flat plane perspective where I just see this as wrong. But
I mean, you have very basic. The thing is, if you try to unpack it from like its most basic, premises, you're like, okay, it is not okay to do something to a person which is not reversible, and they have no say over. But then again, that applies to a lot of other things. I think one of the things that we struggled with is that we don't have sort of enough medical knowledge to know if there's a sort of comparable procedure which we are sort of treating in a very different light, because that might be a good way to expose potential hypocrisy if you know of such a thing.
Yeah, let us know, people. Let us know if we can follow up in the next episode.
If you have had a weird procedure done to you as a kid, call 11135.
I'm not giving out my mobile number on this podcast.
Well, is it on Facebook anyway?
It probably is, actually. People could probably find it, so...
Call you and ask him.
This episode's going to be a bit more fancy though when it gets released, because I believe you've created a logo, haven't you?
Oh yes, yes. I think the logo was still but the placeholder name podcast though, so I'll have to adjust.
For God's sake, I was really hoping that we could release this one with a bit more, flash and glamour.
100% agree. I got criticized and laughed at and mocked because apparently it was called both tracks parentheses edit close parentheses, which was just rename episode 3.
I think the last episode was not named. That was the original episode. I think our last episode was named properly. Okay. Don't worry. It was named Confidently Incorrect episode 3, I think, or episode 4 maybe, depending on how we're counting this, sure. Which again is kind of bizarre. But yeah, it should be fine. I think if you can create a logo.
We'll go episode 8, episode X.
Yeah. There's just loads of stuff you're missing out on, guys, that you will never hear. We just pretend that it's been released anyway, and we'll just keep counting.
Yeah.
So we can get to our episode 50 very quickly. But that's the way it goes. Yeah, so we'll get a logo out at some point. I want to sort of create a website as well, maybe somewhere to host our beloved creation.
100%, and I want to get us on iTunes. That's a definite summer project.
Oh, on iTunes would be the perfect. I'll look into that.
Big thing is we need this will combine with the website because you need to host your own stuff for iTunes. It's not like YouTube where you upload it to their servers. It's like you host it, and then you have a specific API that iTunes uses to access stuff on your end. So that's a bit more complicated. We'll get there.
You don't pay iTunes though?
No, I don't think they need you to pay them.
Oh, okay, cool. We just had to pay for a website.
Actually, no. We can do everything through the student-run computing facility, which is like this free thing here in Cambridge, which gives you some server space.
Beautiful. That's what I like to hear.
Yes.
Fantastic. So our IT department, which is currently Max Knocker, will attempt to improve the situation.
And graphics department as well.
Yeah.
I mean, you're the editing studio, so.
I'm the editing department. We've got a lot of things going on here.
Thoughts on guest appearances?
Yes.
Yes, no.
I think it can definitely be.
Maybe.
I think it definitely be a yes, but the person has to have listened to one of our podcasts before, so they sort of get a flavour for it. Ideally,
yeah, they need to know the name.
They need to know the name. They need to know that they have to talk in a certain way with a certain air of confidence and incorrectness. Indeed. But yes, I'm definitely I'm in favour of that. I think people that's what they'd like to see. If you'd like to start on our podcast, do let us know. Yes, we're happy to have anyone on. I think that also they can sort of bring their own topics as well, so that we have more. Exactly.
So if you have something that you're really passionate and want to talk about and be confidently incorrect on, I think this could be your platform.
Consider us your neutral hosts. You can be the confidently incorrect one, and we can just be the interviewers. We can just air your platform, and I'll edit it for you, so you can have your opinion voiced on the airwaves free of charge. So who could get better than that? But I won't be broadcasting political advertising or anything like that. Not doing any of that because we're neutral here. We just have very strong opinions, but we're not politically aligned in any way. So I'm going to leave it at that.
Speak for yourself. I have a secret agenda.
Oh crap! The lizards, they're back.